The man who stood alone. The heat of the afternoon sun hung over the valley like a warning. People rushed toward the giant idol standing in the town square, carrying food, oil, perfumes, offerings for a statue that couldn't hear them, couldn't see them, couldn't save them. The entire land had fallen into the grip of idol worship, and the crowd moved with blind confidence, almost as if their hearts were asleep. But from a high cliff overlooking the scene, a lone figure watched quietly. His eyes were firm, unshaken, filled with the truth God had placed in him. This was Ilyas, the prophet sent to a people who had traded the worship of the one God for man-made illusions. Everywhere Ilyas went, he saw the same thing: families bowing to carved stones, leaders kneeling before idols they themselves built, and children taught to fear statues instead of their creator. It wasn't just worship. It was a complete surrender of morality, dignity, and truth. And yet, Ilyas did not lose hope. He knew that a single voice, backed by divine truth, can echo louder than 1,000 lies. One evening, as torches lit up the marketplace and the idol priests gathered to perform rituals, Ilyas stepped forward. His voice cut through the ceremony like lightning. "How long?" he called out. "Will you continue to worship what cannot help you? How long will you bow to those whom neither created you nor control your destiny?" The crowd froze. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some stared with anger, others with shock. The priests glared, their pride wounded. But Ilyas didn't step back. He didn't soften his words. He knew this moment mattered. "Your Lord," he continued, "is one, the creator of the heavens and the earth, not these idols that you built with your own hands." A few people looked down, guilt flickering in their eyes, but many clenched their fists. Idol worship wasn't just a religious practice. It had become their culture, their identity, their pride. And for someone to challenge it meant shaking their entire world. That night marked the beginning of a long struggle, a war not fought with weapons, but with truth against arrogance, guidance against blindness. Ilyas stood alone, but he chose to stand, because sometimes one fearless voice is all it takes to wake a sleeping nation, a nation drowning in its own darkness. Theme: corruption of his people. The next morning, Ilyas walked through the narrow streets of his people, and what he saw confirmed his deepest fear. Corruption wasn't just growing. It had become a lifestyle. Every corner echoed with injustice. The wealthy manipulated the poor. Leaders used their authority to satisfy their desires. Truth was mocked, and falsehood was celebrated like a festival. At the city gate, two merchants argued loudly. A poor farmer begged them for fairness, holding a small bag of grain he wanted to sell. But they laughed in his face, snatched the grain, and pushed him to the dirt. People standing nearby watched, silently, as if cruelty had become normal. Ilyas helped the man up, dusting off his shoulders. "Fear God," he whispered to the crowd, "for injustice destroys nations faster than any enemy." But the people turned away. Some even smirked, pretending not to hear him. As Ilyas traveled further, he saw idol temples built taller than houses, decorated with gold collected through corruption. The priests who claimed to speak for the gods lived in luxury while ordinary families starved. Children were taught songs praising idols, while the name of the true God was barely whispered. And behind all of this stood the king, a ruler whose arrogance poisoned the entire land. He encouraged idol worship because it benefited him. These idols couldn't command justice. They couldn't question tyranny. They simply stood silent, allowing the king to do as he pleased. Ilyas confronted groups of people, reminding them of the blessings God had once given their ancestors, lands of plenty, rain that nourished every field, peace that kept enemies away. You were honored, he told them, because you worshipped the one who controls the heavens. But today, your hearts chase illusions. Some listened, most didn't. Corruption had seeped too deep. Families argued constantly. Greed replaced gratitude. Even nature seemed to respond. Crops began to fail. Rivers thinned, and the sky grew hotter every passing week. One elder stopped Ilyas on the road, his face lined with fear. "We used to be a people of faith," he said quietly. "Now we're a people of pride." Ilyas nodded. "And pride," he replied, "is the doorway to destruction." He knew this wasn't just a religious decline. It was a moral collapse, a nation drowning in its own darkness, too blind to realize it. But Ilyas was not done. Truth had to be spoken, no matter how loud the corruption roared. Signs from the sky. Theme: miracles of Elias AS. Word of Ilyas spread quickly. Some called him a troublemaker. Others whispered that he was a man touched by the heavens. But no matter what they said, no one could deny one thing. Wherever he went, extraordinary signs followed him. One afternoon, a group of idol priests cornered him near the riverbank. Their voices were sharp with anger. "If your Lord is real," one of them mocked, "let him prove it. Show us a sign. Make this dry land bloom. Make the sky send down rain." Ilyas looked at them with calm eyes. "Miracles are not toys," he said, "nor are they entertainment for the arrogant. They come only by the permission of Allah." But the people had gathered now: merchants, farmers, children, and their curiosity was rising like a storm. So Ilyas walked toward a patch of brittle soil. The earth cracked from the growing drought. He knelt, placed his hand upon it, and whispered a prayer from the depths of his heart. A hush fell over the crowd, and then, right before their eyes, green shoots broke through the ground, fresh, vibrant, alive. The crowd gasped as the barren patch transformed into a small garden, flowers unfolding as if awakened from a long sleep. The priests stepped back, speechless, but Ilyas didn't smile, nor did he seek praise. "This sign," he said softly, "is not for your entertainment. It is a reminder your Creator is real. He is watching." Another miracle came days later. A widow, who had been starving with her young son, offered Ilyas a small jug of oil, her only possession. She insisted that a prophet of God should not walk away empty-handed. Moved by her sincerity, Ilyas prayed for her home. From that day on, the widow's oil never ran out. Her storage jar remained filled no matter how many times she used it. Neighbors whispered in awe, but the woman simply held her son and cried tears of gratitude. These miracles spread through the villages like wind in dry grass. Some hearts softened, others hardened even more, refusing to accept the truth even when it unfolded right in front of them. But something was changing. For the first time in years, people were questioning the idols they had worshipped since childhood. Questions turned into doubt, doubt into curiosity. This was the spark Ilyas had prayed for, the beginning of awakening. The call to the one true God. The miracles had stirred the land, but Ilyas knew that miracles alone could not change hearts. What truly mattered was the message, clear, pure, and uncompromising. And so, he began delivering it openly, day after day, village after village. He stood in marketplaces, where traders shouted over one another. He stood at crossroads, where travelers paused with weary feet. And in every place he delivered the same call. A message that cut through centuries of falsehood like a blade of truth. Your Lord is one. He has no partners. He has no rivals. He alone gives life and causes death. He alone controls the rain, the harvest, the winds, and your fate. People listened, some with interest, some with fear, others with annoyance. A young man once challenged him in front of a large crowd. Ilyas, he shouted, our fathers worshipped these idols. Their fathers worshipped them too. Are you saying they were all wrong? Ilyas stepped closer, looking him in the eyes. If your fathers walked into fire, he said gently, would you follow them? Truth is not inherited. It is recognized. The crowd fell silent. He reminded them of the stories of earlier prophets, Ibrahim, Musa, men who stood alone, just as he now stood. He explained how every prophet brought the same core message. Worship Allah alone, live with justice, and walk with humility. His words were simple, yet heavy. The idols you worship, he continued, cannot move. They cannot speak. They cannot punish you or protect you. You sacrifice your wealth to them. You bow your heads before them, but you receive nothing in return except false hopes. Some people lowered their gaze, shame creeping into their hearts. But the idol priests clenched their teeth. His message threatened everything they controlled: their status, their income, their influence over the people. And so they began spreading rumors. Ilyas is dangerous. He wants to destroy our traditions. He is dividing the nation. But despite their lies, people kept gathering around him. Something about his voice, steady, sincere, fearless, pulled them in like light in a dark cave. At night, when most were asleep, Ilyas would raise his hands in prayer, asking Allah to soften hearts, to guide his people before punishment reached them. For he knew the truth. When a nation rejects Tawheed, it doesn't just lose faith, it loses its soul. A king who feared the truth, confronting a wicked king. The growing influence of Ilyas did not go unnoticed by the palace. Behind the stone walls, guarded by soldiers and decorated with gold taken from the people, lived a king whose arrogance had no limits. His rule was built on fear, manipulation, and idol worship. Those idols weren't just religious symbols, they were the backbone of his authority. So when whispers reached him that a man was calling the nation back to the worship of the one true God, the king felt threatened. Truth is the enemy of the corrupt. One afternoon, soldiers stormed into the marketplace and surrounded Ilyas. People watched with wide eyes as the prophet was taken to the palace. They feared the worst. No one spoke against the king, except this one man. Inside the throne room, the king sat high above the crowd, wrapped in lavish robes. Ilyas, he thundered, you speak against our gods. You insult our traditions. You turn my people against me. Who gave you this authority? Ilyas stood tall, calm, unshaken. "The one who created you," he replied. "The one who created the heavens and the earth. You fear losing power, but you should fear the Lord who will hold you accountable." Gasps rippled through the court. No one had ever spoken to the king like that. The king's face turned red with anger. "Silence. Do you realize I can command your death this very moment?" "You cannot harm me," Ilyas said firmly, "unless Allah permits it. And he has sent me to warn you, not to fear you." The king slammed his fist against the throne. "Leave idols? Worship one God? Never. This land belongs to me, and I decide what the people worship." Ilyas stepped forward. "This land belongs only to Allah, and he will take away his blessings from you. Your crops will fail, your sky will dry, and your people will suffer until you turn back to him." The advisors whispered nervously. The priests shifted uncomfortably. Even they could sense that Ilyas' words carried a weight no human authority could match. But the king dismissed him with a wave of his hand, choosing pride over truth. As Ilyas walked out of the palace, the guards kept their eyes lowered. Something about the encounter had shaken even them. The stage was set. A wicked ruler had rejected the message, and now a great trial was about to begin, one that would change the entire nation. When the sky stopped breathing, famine and drought. When Ilyas walked out of the palace, his heart was heavy, but his trust in Allah was firm. He had delivered the message clearly. The king had rejected it proudly, and now the warning was about to unfold exactly as Allah had decreed. The first sign appeared quietly. The wind slowed. The clouds thinned. The air grew hotter than usual. Farmers glanced at the sky with concern, whispering that something felt different. Within weeks, the rain stopped completely. At first, people shrugged it off. "It's just a dry spell," they said. "The gods will send rain." But the sky remained empty day after day. Week after week, the fields cracked, the rivers shrank, wells began to dry. Fear crept through the land like a shadow. Cows wandered restlessly, hungry for grass that no longer grew. Children cried in the morning because the water jugs at home stayed empty. Even the idol priests, who once boasted about their god's power, now avoided eye contact with the people. The king called an emergency gathering. His voice trembled with frustration. "Where is the rain our gods promised?" he shouted. But deep inside, a small voice whispered the truth. This was exactly what Ilyas had warned. Ilyas continued walking through the villages, reminding the people gently, "This drought is not punishment, it is a wake-up call. Allah is showing you the weakness of the idols you trust." Some listened, others resisted. One evening, a group of desperate farmers approached him. Their clothes were dusty, their faces tired. "Prophet," one of them said, "ask your Lord to send rain. We cannot survive like this." Ilyas looked at them with compassion. "Rain will return when your hearts return," he replied. "Turn to Allah sincerely, and the sky that is closed to you will open again." Their eyes lowered in shame. Meanwhile, the king grew paranoid. He blamed Ilyas for everything: the failing crops, the drying rivers, the growing panic. He sent soldiers to search for him, hoping to silence the truth once and for all. But Allah protected his prophet. Wherever the soldiers went, Ilyas had already moved on, guided by signs only he could understand. He became a moving miracle, appearing where he needed to be, disappearing when danger approached. The drought worsened. Food became scarce. Prices soared. A once prosperous nation fell to its knees. But even in this suffering, Ilyas saw hope. Because sometimes people need to be brought to the edge before their hearts finally open. Standing with truth, standing alone, loyalty and rejection. As the drought stretched on, Ilyas continued calling his people toward truth. But with every village he entered, the same pattern repeated. A few hearts softened, but many hardened even more. Loyalty and rejection now stood side by side, revealing who truly sought God and who only sought comfort. One afternoon, Ilyas stood beneath a dying fig tree, its leaves brittle under the scorching sun. A small group of villagers gathered around him, men, women, even children who had seen the idols fail them again and again. Their faces carried exhaustion, but also a spark of hope. "We believe you," one man said quietly. "We can see now that the idols have no power. But the king, the priests, they threaten anyone who follows you." Ilyas' voice was gentle. "Faith isn't proven when life is easy. It's proven when standing with truth costs you something." Among the listeners was a young woman who stepped forward with trembling hands. "My family disowned me," she said. "They say I betrayed our traditions because I stopped bowing to the idols." Ilyas looked at her, his expression filled with compassion. "Allah never abandons those who choose him. Your courage is not unseen." But not everyone showed courage. Word of this small gathering reached the idol priests. That evening, they marched into the village, shouting accusations. "Ilyas is the reason for this drought. He is cursed. He is tricking you." Fear spread instantly. Some of the very people who had stood with Ilyas that morning now stepped away, pretending they had never supported him. A man who had earlier claimed faith whispered, "Forgive us. We cannot go against the king." Ilyas did not get angry. He had expected this. Truth tests people, and not all are ready to be tested. Yet among the crowd were a handful who didn't move people, whose hearts had awakened. They stood behind Ilyas silently, even when the priests glared at them with hatred. The priests grew frustrated. "If you follow him," one threatened, "you will starve. You will lose your homes." A young shepherd replied calmly, "We are already starving under your idols. We would rather be hungry with truth than full with falsehood." Even in rejection, Ilyas felt strength growing. Because loyalty from a few sincere hearts is more valuable than empty praise from 1,000 cowards. The drought had divided the nation not just by wealth or power, but by faith, courage, and the willingness to face reality. And the real test was still ahead. The remnant of the faithful, the few believers. Months passed under the burning sky, and the drought carved scars across the land-dry wells. Empty barns, hollow eyes. Yet in this suffering, something remarkable began to happen. While most people clung to the idols in fear, a small group quietly broke away from the rest. They were few, so few that their numbers could barely fill a single room. But their hearts shone with a light the nation had forgotten. These were the true believers. They didn't follow Ilyas because they expected miracles or instant relief. They followed him because truth had finally reached them in a way lies never could. One night, as the moon rose pale and thin, The believers gathered secretly in a valley sheltered by cliffs. Ilyas stood before them, the faint desert wind tugging at his cloak. Their faces were tired, but their eyes were steady. "You are few," Elias said softly, "but remember Allah has always supported the few who stood firm. Faith is not measured by numbers. It is measured by sincerity." An elderly man stepped forward, leaning on a cane. "Prophet of Allah," he said, voice shaking with emotion, "we once lived with full barns and heavy pockets. Yet we were spiritually empty. Now we have almost nothing. But for the first time, our hearts feel alive." Elias nodded. "Because faith fills what the world cannot." A young boy spoke next. He was no older than 12, yet his courage outshone many grown men. "My father still worships the idols," he said, "but I told him I will not bow to them anymore. He was angry, but I wasn't afraid." Elias placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You are braver than an entire army." But outside their small gathering, the nation grew darker. The king intensified his hunt for Ilyas. Soldiers raided homes, searching for anyone who followed him. Some believers were threatened, others were beaten, yet not a single one renounced their faith. The idol priests grew desperate. "These few will ruin everything," they cried. "If we don't crush them now, the whole nation will turn." They didn't understand one thing. Truth doesn't need a majority. It only needs a spark, and Ilyas had found that. Spark the remnant of faithful, souls who refused to bow to falsehood. Even when the entire world pressed against them, they were small in number, but they were the heart of the awakening. Departure nitrogen monoxide I could follow. His mysterious departure. The drought had reached its peak. The land was nearly silent now, no rustling crops, no flowing rivers, not even the chirping of birds. Yet within that silence, something profound was happening. The hearts of the true believers were firm. The false gods had collapsed in the people's minds, and the king, weakened by fear and guilt, had begun losing the loyalty of his own court. It was in this moment that Allah prepared a sign unlike anything the nation had ever witnessed. One evening, Ilyas walked with his closest followers into a secluded valley. The sky glowed with a strange mix of gold and crimson, as if nature itself sensed that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The believers walked quietly, unsure why Ilyas had gathered them. He stopped near a rocky cliff and turned to them with a peaceful smile. "My mission among you is nearly complete," he said. Their hearts tightened. Some stepped forward. "Prophet of Allah," an elderly woman whispered, "don't leave us. The drought hasn't ended. The king still hunts you. We still need your guidance." Ilyas raised a gentle hand. "Guidance comes from Allah. A prophet is only a bridge, not the destination." The wind suddenly shifted soft at first, then stronger, surrounding Ilyas with a warmth the believers had never felt before. Their clothes fluttered, their eyes widened. Something unseen was descending, something beyond human understanding. A young shepherd shouted, "Look, the sky." Above them, a column of swirling light formed, spiraling downward like a celestial staircase. The ground trembled softly. The believers watched in awe and fear, tears streaming down their faces. Ilyas stood in the center of the wind, his cloak rising as if held by invisible hands. "Do not fear," he said calmly. "This is Allah's mercy upon me, and a sign for you. the light wrapped around him. The valley filled with a radiant glow, brighter than the sun yet gentle on their eyes. And in a moment that no human tongue can fully describe, Ilyas was lifted. His feet rose from the earth, his form ascending into the swirling brilliance. No chariot, no wings, no earthly explanation, just a divine departure only Allah could command. The believers fell to their knees, some weeping, some smiling through their tears. They understood now. This was not a death, it was a transition, a lifting, a miracle for the ages. And as the light faded into the sky, the valley returned to silence. But the hearts of the believers burned with a strength they had never known. Light for every generation, lessons for modern faith. The valley slowly returned to stillness after the miraculous departure of Prophet Ilyas. But the hearts of the believers felt forever changed. They stood for a long time in the fading glow, realizing they had witnessed something there. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren would speak of 4 centuries, a moment that could never be erased. In the days that followed, rain clouds began to gather. The sky, silent for years, finally opened. Soft rain fell upon the land, soaking into the cracked soil, filling the empty rivers, washing away the dust of arrogance. For the first time in a long time, people looked upward, not at idols, but toward God. But the story of Ilyas wasn't meant to stay in that ancient land. It was meant to travel through time, crossing deserts, oceans, generations, cultures, and nations. It wasn't simply history, it was a mirror for every human soul, especially in the modern world. Today, idols don't always look like stone statues. Sometimes they look like wealth, fame, power, ego, or desires. People may not bow their heads physically, but they bow with their hearts. They chase things that cannot save them, cannot guide them, cannot give them peace. The same spiritual drought that destroyed Ilyas. Nation still appears in new forms, but his story teaches us something essential. Truth stands even when you stand alone. Ilyas wasn't backed by crowds, armies, or governments. He stood with God, and that was enough. Faith is tested, not claimed. The believers were few, but they were sincere. Real faith doesn't follow popularity, it follows conviction. False gods always collapse, whether they are idols, corrupt leaders, toxic cultures, or empty lifestyles. Anything built on lies eventually crumbles. Guidance is a mercy, not a burden. Ilyas didn't fight his people. He fought for their souls. Every warning he gave was an act of compassion. And finally, Allah never abandons the faithful. Not then, not now, not ever. As the believers rebuilt their lives, they carried these lessons forward. They taught their children about the Prophet, who stood alone against a nation of falsehood. The man who called them to Tawheed. The man whom Allah lifted in a miracle that still echoes through time. The story of Ilyas ends in that glowing valley, but the message of Ilyas lives in every heart that chooses truth over tradition, faith over fear, and God over everything else.